Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com and Celebrity Spokesmodel for the ClassicsToday.com merchandise store, where you can get things such as this fabulous sweatshirt and lots of other good stuff. So go to ClassicsToday.com and have a look. I want to talk to you today about a marvelous composer who I just dropped. Well, let's try him again. Here he is. Salomon Jadassohn. Marvelous, interesting, conservative, someone really to talk about. But first, I have to give a birthday shout out to one of my regular viewers, Mr. Jose Militano. Happy birthday, Jose. I hope you have many, many more. And it doesn't really matter what day it is because people can watch these videos anytime, so I'm not even going to give the date. I'm just going to say it's Jose Militano's birthday, and he can watch this whenever he wants, whether it's his birthday or not. And of course, so can all of you. So, back to Salomon Jadassohn. Salomon Jadassohn, who was he? Well, he was, his years were 1831 to 1902. He was a member of the Leipzig school, the school of Mendelssohn, and sort of quasi kind of Schumann, but, basically the Mendelssohn school, Karl Reinecke and those people. And the fact of the matter is that we were taught, as we grew up, I think, to really believe that the entire pack of post-Mendelssohnian composers was just awful, that they sounded like faux Mendelssohn. And, well, a lot of them did. They really did. Some of them were just terrible. But one of the things you begin to realize when you actually have a chance to listen to the music, as opposed to merely just talk about it without having had the experience of hearing it, is that what matters, of course, is not how conservative somebody is or how, radical they are. What matters is whether or not they can compose. I mean, if you've got the talent, you can compose. It doesn't make any difference what style you compose in. You're going to write good music. And frankly, the difference between conservative 1840s or 50s and radical 1860s or 70s, in geographical terms, geological terms, pardon me, not geographical, in terms of geological time, it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. I can well imagine somebody from, 200 or 300 years from now thinking back on the 19th century and saying that they can't tell the difference between Mendelssohn and Wagner, that it all sounds the same to them. And they might be right, because composers of this period had far more in common than that separated them. And we make very, very big distinctions out of things that are very unimportant and very small. And so I just want to make the point that, as with all of these things, you can't generalize so much. You've got to actually listen to the music. Now, Jadassohn was very, very interesting. He was a major, major educator in Leipzig for about 4 decades. He wrote books on harmony, on orchestration, on the place of melody in music. He was just a tremendous textbook writer, first of all, and educator, and highly, highly respected. He did not achieve the ultimate position, which would have been director of the Leipzig Conservatory, because he was a Jew, and he contributed quite a bit to Jewish liturgical music of the period, trying to find ways to reconcile the needs of the Jewish liturgy with the best in German art music, art songs, and other things. And so, and a lot of his compositions were very, 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 very popular and were extremely frequently performed. But as a composer of abstract music, well, he was a little less successful. Let's face it. And even at the end of his life in 1902, there's a wonderful quotation from him in the booklet here, where he says, I grew up with Mendelssohn and Schumann and Schubert, and I had great admiration for Wagner. He liked Wagner very much, so he wasn't radical conservative in that sense at all. But he said, I'm out of touch. I can't respond to contemporary music at all. I just don't, and that's the way it goes. And I liked that. I like somebody who just knew who he was, knew what he liked, knew what he could do. And like a lot of pedagogues, Some of them, of course, are dry as dust and very pedagogical, but others are not. Others manage to compose music which is surprisingly unpedagogical, and Jadassohn was one of those. There are a few in history. Think about Fuchs. You know Fuchs, F-U-X, the guy who wrote Gradus ad Parnassum, the fearsome, terrifying counterpoint treatise in the form of a Socratic dialogue. I think he wrote it in the late 1600s, early 1700s. It was the book that Haydn taught himself how to compose music from. His actual music is really very charming and very enjoyable and not at all, self-consciously learned. That was also the case with Robert Fuchs, not to be confused with Fuchs, but Fuchs, the teacher of Mahler and all of those people in Vienna. He was known as the Serenade because he wrote those lovely, lovely string serenades, sunny, relaxing, enjoyable music that was just a celebration of compositional craft. That was the kind of composer that Jadassohn was. And he wrote 4 symphonies contained on these 2 splendid CPO discs featuring Howard Griffiths conducting the Brandenburgisches Staatsorchester Frankfurt. And it's really good stuff. Also with the cavatinas for violin and one for cello. They're lovely pieces. And he wrote a couple piano concertos, which are actually included in Hyperion's Romantic Piano Concerto series, along with the Dreisica Concerto, I think they're coupled with. It's good, solid music. Good, solid, abstract music. Touching, effective, beautifully orchestrated for a very conservative orchestra. No special effects or weird percussion bits here, but he understood critical things like that good orchestration depends on how you handle woodwinds, things like that. It is just symphonies. They're full of beautiful solo lines, singing melodies, very, very attractive music. And I want to play you a couple samples just so you get a sense of them. I'm going to give you a touch of the slow movement of Symphony No. 2. First of all, that's the biggest one. It's about 40 minutes long. The others run from like 20 and a bit to half an hour. But here's a bit of the slow movement of Symphony No. 2, which is in A major, if you care about those things. Here we go. Absolutely lovely, passionate, romantic, beautiful, beautiful music. And a little bit of the fourth, I think, would be nice too. It's the only one in a minor key. It's in C minor. This is not Beethoven's minor. This is not Sturm und Drang minor. This is pathetically affecting and attractive and touching minor. But it's not going to be an expressionist nightmare, which of course we all love, and it's not going to be, desperately tragic. Nothing like that. It's just stern and tempestuous and well-written, attractive, fun to listen to. It's good stuff in the car. It really is. It sounds really good in the car. I've been doing a lot of listening in the car lately to some of these things. And these symphonies work very, very nicely for short trips. Go to the supermarket with some Jadassohn. You'll enjoy it. Here's a bit of the opening allegro, the exposition from his Symphony No. 4 in C minor. Now, I've reviewed this set before for ClassicsToday.com. And in the ClassicsToday.com review, it's an insider review, I include samples from the first and third symphonies. So if you're an insider, you can go and hear more and read that review as well. So there's like lots of samples and things for you to test out to see if you're interested. This was always a few years ago that I did that review, and every so often I go back because, as a critic, we don't have a lot of time sometimes to live with this stuff. And the question is, does it withstand repetition? Does it survive the very limited test of time? Because, my lifespan is not geological time either. But I've gone back and I've listened to this music several times since, and it holds up very, very well. One of the things that it makes it work, I think, is that the balance of forms in these symphonies is beautifully worked out. It's not one of those situations where you have like 2 quick movements and then a 20-minute slow movement, or you have a big, huge, top-heavy sonata allegro and then a bunch of short little intermezzish type things. Jadassohn wrote beautifully structured, complete works. And so you're always dealing with movements that are, 5 to 8 minutes, or, at the most. Everything works out. Nothing overstays its welcome. And when you're done with the whole thing, there's just a really, really satisfying feeling of completeness about the entire composition. And that's a gift. I mean, the guy just knew how to write music. He knew how to teach it. He knew how to write it. And I think these symphonies are lovely. They were criticized in their day because he was considered to be not profound enough to be a symphonist. But I actually think he was very smart in that sense, because if he had tried, he was in a no-win situation, being in Germany in the second half of the 19th century, after all, as a symphonist. If he had tried to be profound, they would have said no Jew could be profound. I mean, because that's what they did with Jewish composers who often tried to be profound. And if, on the other hand, he wrote lighter works, which is what he did, they would say, he's a Jew, therefore he can't be profound. It wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have made any difference. I think there's a lot to be said for somebody who understands his circumstances and his gifts and his talent. I get no sense that he's writing down or inhibited in any way, shape, or form, and he never suggested as much. He never did. In fact, one of the fascinating things about the Fourth Symphony, which you just heard, is that it was composed around 1888, which was the same year as Mahler's First. And that really gives you a sense of the gulf between where Jadassohn was in terms of his own idiom and his own, artistic credo, and where Mahler was as a young radical. It's fascinating to compare the two. So if you're looking for some nice, attractive, well-written, thoroughly enjoyable symphonies that don't make any particular demands on you, either emotionally or intellectually, they just go down easy. And sometimes that's what we all need, isn't it? Then give Salomon Jadassohn a shot. Keep on listening, folks. Thanks for joining me, and take care.